UAE aside, we might as well move on to some other things here, and we've kind of we'll get onto predictions later on, but in terms of this year's Tour de France, there's 21 stages available, and which stage do you guys think is going to be the hardest stage of this year's tour? We know stage 17 is incredible with the Col de la Loze, etc., but is there a stage that you guys, or stages, we might as well talk about the hardest stages of the tour, open that up a bit.
Stage 17 has to be the number one for the hardest stage. Col de la Loze, as we saw in 2020, probably the most attritional stage, apart from La Planche time trial, that we had at that year's Tour de France. It's the highest point. It's probably, I think it is the longest climb in the Tour de France. We finished on a downhill, which might change it a little bit, but it's still going to be tough, and we have Comé d'Orléans, a couple of difficult climbs that lead on to that finale as well. I also believe the stage 2 Saint-Gervais-Mont-Blanc on stage 15 at the end of the second week of racing is a really tough one. The final 50 kilometers are relentless, and the final kicker to Saint-Gervais-Mont-Blanc, it's a two-step climb. We have a steep first part, a downhill, and then another steep kicker all the way to the end in Saint-Gervais. I think that is going to be a really attritional alpine stage, and also coming the day before the rest day might also mean that the riders are hungry for something.
I want to throw stage 14 into the mix as well, with the Col de la Lamaze, then followed by the Col de Jouplan. And, that last climb, the Col de Jouplan, that's 11.7k at 8.5% with bonus seconds available at the top. And then it's a descent to the finish. So, if you are a Pogacar or whoever and you're wanting to get a couple of bonus seconds, 11k at 8%, that's definitely considered as an area where you can make some serious ground up. And I think with the descent to the finish, kind of the out of sight, out of mind sort of mentality, because if you're kind of just around the corners and they can't see you, it's like a mental game as well. I think that's going to be a really brutal stage as well. You could also probably say that stage 1, actually, we all remember Opiomi and the chaos of the first road stage. Lots of short, sharp, narrow climbs where positioning is key. I think everybody will be thinking about that nightmare day where so much of the peloton crashed, that being at the front will be absolutely integral. And with such the yellow jerseys on the line, the GC riders won't want to lose time. There's the punchers like Van der Poels and Wout van Aert and Alaphilippe who want to keep in good position. I reckon that might not be the hardest day, but I think that it will probably be the most stressful, where the peloton will be really on edge. So I think that stage 1, although not on paper hardest, I think it could be mentally probably the hardest one for the peloton to get through for sure.
Also, I feel like stage 9 and stage 13 will be stressful as well, because these are stages that end on steep summit finishes, and there'll be a lot of sort of emphasis and pressure put on them at the end of the first week of racing. It's the new Puy de Dôme climb. There's probably going to be a lot of sort of speculation of how's it going to be ridden, yada yada yada, because they don't know the climb very well. They probably haven't even done a reconnaissance ride, given that the road only opened about a month ago. So that will be a bit of an unknown, and the riders probably will feel very tense about that one. It's the Massif Central, which is usually a quite chaotic part of France when it comes to the Tour. I feel like that stage as well could be quite a big deal. And then Grand Colombier on stage 13, it's 14 Juillet. Lots of fans on the side of the road, also with the added pressure of it being a steep summit finish where Pogacar won in the past. There'll be a lot of pressure to try to flip the script there.
To what extent do you think the time trial is going to be hard? Because it's not a La Planche de Bellevue time trial, but it's not exactly a flat affair, to say the least.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? It kind of suits quite a few riders, but will probably be for the GC guys to probably take the victory on that day. But yeah, it is a tricky one, because there is tough sections in this 2 kilometers at like 9% or something like that. I think it'll be intriguing to see what teams do in terms of bike changes and stuff like that. That's become weirdly normal in TTs and Grand Tours, actually. The Giro this year, the Planche de Bellevue time trial, it seems to be more and more frequent that teams are having to decide between TT bikes and road bikes. So I'm interested to see what teams do in terms of that. Are they going to swap at the bottom of the climb and go with a TT bike? Is that worth it, the 2K at 9%, in terms of the time that you kind of lose? I'm not really too sure. We saw in the Giro, I can't remember how long Geraint Thomas or the riders on balance were still, but let's say it was like 10 seconds or something like that. I don't know, maybe 15 seconds, are you going to gain that time back? But then it kind of levels off at the top. So is that actually beneficial to have a road bike there? I think there's a lot to take into consideration there. It's probably one of the harder TTs in terms of pacing. I'd probably say that Planche de Belfi was sort of relatively flat rolling and then just Planche de Belfi. Whereas this is like climb, flat, very steep climb again, and then levels off. So I think it's going to be an interesting TT to watch, because you could very much have riders who leading at time point one and then capitulate by the end. I reckon that's a very likely possibility.
It's so short. It's only 20 kilometers. I don't think we're going to get big gaps on that T2. Maybe I'll be horribly wrong with that prediction, but I think the time gaps will be quite small.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think we're all kind of agreed that stage 17 is probably the big cheese in terms of these stages.